You've probably heard nitric oxide mentioned in conversations about heart health, circulation, and exercise performance. But if someone asked you to explain what it actually is, would you feel confident doing that? There's a lot of buzz around nitric oxide and not a lot of clear understanding around it. So in this video, we're going to slow it down. We'll clarify what nitric oxide really is, and walk through simple, practical ways to help your body make more of it efficiently. I'm Dr. Kenny, root cause health detective, and my passion project is helping people make sense of confusing health topics just like this one. And if you appreciate root cause functional topics just like this one, tapping the like button sends a signal that you'd like more content like this and helps it reach other people. Let's start by clearing up what nitric oxide actually is and why it matters. Nitric oxide is one of those molecules that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it quietly influences several core aspects of how your body functions. It isn't a vitamin or a hormone that you take directly. It's a signaling molecule that your body produces on its own. And foundationally, what makes it so important is its effects on relaxing blood vessels. When nitric oxide is functioning well and efficiently, blood vessels can relax appropriately. When your production drops, however, that flexibility changes. And from a functional pattern-based perspective, when I see shifts in blood pressure, circulation, endurance, even cognitive function, nitric oxide becomes a part of the conversation. Before we talk about how to support nitric oxide, we need to understand what it's actually doing inside your body, because the strategies to influence only make sense when the function is clear. The most recognized and celebrated role of nitric oxide is vasodilation. That means that it signals blood vessels to relax and widen. The gist is that when vessels widen, blood flows more smoothly and freely. And that affects blood pressure regulation, delivery to all of your tissues, including the fingertips and toes, and perhaps most importantly, the delivery of oxygen and nutrients to your tissues and to your cells. Nitric oxide also influences how blood flows to the brain, how platelets behave, and aspects of sexual health that depend on proper vascular function. It can also make exercise more efficient. It can essentially reduce the oxygen cost of activity and positively influence muscle performance. And when you zoom out, the theme is flow. Nitric oxide is fundamentally about flow. Blood flow, yes, but also oxygen flow and nutrient flow. And this lines up with how our physiology tends to behave. And zoom out even further, when flow improves, systems communicate more efficiently. And now that we've framed what nitric oxide actually does, the next question becomes how your body actually makes it. What's cool is your body doesn't just rely on a single pathway to make nitric oxide. There are multiple systems that are working in parallel to each other. There's a pathway that uses specific enzymes and the amino acid L-arginine, for instance. There's also a pathway that begins from nitrates in food. And there's yet another that involves the nasal passages. Each of these contributes differently, and they can shift from time to time, including as we age. So instead of thinking of nitric oxide as a switch that you simply turn on or off, it's more accurate to see it as a network, and that changes how you approach improving it. Let's start with the enzyme and L-arginine pathway first. This major pathway involves enzymes called nitric oxide synthases. These enzymes convert the amino acid L-arginine into nitric oxide. And interestingly, different tissues use different versions of this enzyme, but the end result is the same. Ultimately, nitric oxide is produced and nearby blood vessels relax and widen. That relaxation allows for the blood flow to adjust. The amino acid, or building block of protein, L-arginine, can be produced inside the body, but you also obtain it through protein-containing foods. This includes meat, poultry, fish, nuts, seeds, and legumes as well. In certain situations, the body's demand for nitric oxide may exceed this particular pathway's ability to produce it, which is where the dietary intake pathway becomes a lot more relevant. So that's one pathway that's enzyme-based and protein-based. But this next one's one of my favorites because of how many pieces are coordinated to make this chemical reaction happen. The second major pathway starts with chemical compounds called nitrates from foods. This is not the same chemical compound in processed meats, for instance. When you eat nitrate-rich vegetables like beets, arugula, celery, or spinach. Those nitrates are absorbed and then concentrated in your saliva. Bacteria that live on the back of your tongue convert those nitrates to nitrites. And when you swallow those nitrites, they encounter the acidic environment in your stomach. That's where even further conversion takes place. And from there, nitrites can circulate through the bloodstream and be reduced to nitric oxide, especially in conditions where your tissues are demanding more oxygen. And this is where the things often get oversimplified. This pathway of nitric oxide production is not about just one single input, the food alone. What's important about this pathway is that it involves multiple systems working together in a highly coordinated manner. Of course, we have the dietary inputs from the nitrate-containing foods, but also what matters most, but also consideration toward the oral bacteria, as well as the acidity of your stomach. And this is an area where a lot of people have problems. If one part of this chain is disrupted, 1, 2, or 3, your nitric oxide output through this pathway can be greatly reduced. If you're someone who eats well but still feels like circulation or endurance isn't responding the way that you'd expect, this is often where the deeper next questions live. And that leads us directly to the next nitric oxide lever that you can pull, that you can influence more easily than most people realize. There's another internal source of nitric oxide that doesn't rely on the intake of amino acids or the intake of nitrate-containing foods. Interestingly, nitric oxide is produced in your paranasal sinuses, and it mixes with the air that you inhale, but only if you're breathing deeply through your nose. Mouth breathing bypasses this system entirely. So breathing patterns matter, and I find myself going back to patients many times to the breath. If you have a tendency to breathe through your mouth, especially during exercise or sleep, that's a signal worth paying attention to. Even subtle nasal obstruction can shift nitric oxide production patterns over time. So start with awareness in this category. Can you comfortably breathe through your nose for a few minutes at a time? Does it feel strained, or does it feel restricted, or does it feel open? You can also layer nasal breathing with the next strategy, and your influence becomes even more profound. Humming is a surprisingly simple way to influence nitric oxide production in the nasal passages. When you hum, the vibration and the resonance in your nasal sinuses appear to increase nitric oxide production compared to quiet breathing. And this obviously doesn't require any fancy equipment or any supplements. A sample breathing practice is to inhale through your nose deeply, then exhale slowly with a long, steady hum, as long and controlled as you can make it. And beyond the nitric oxide production itself, humming tends to shift breathing into a slower pattern overall. Many people describe it as calming, and it also has the added benefit of stimulating your vagus nerve in the throat. Now let's shift to one of the strategies that can become even more foundational: what you're putting on your plate. As we discussed, vegetables that are high in nitrates work through that second pathway, the enterosalivary pathway we discussed. We mentioned beets, arugula, celery, and spinach, but also cabbage and parsley. When these foods are present in your diet more consistently, the raw materials are more readily available. And when researchers pulled together human trials, nitrate-rich beetroot products showed more consistent effects on lowering systolic blood pressure, or your top number, compared to placebo versions of those foods. And if you're one who appreciates the research, I've linked to a free research summary. It's in the pinned comment in the description below. And an important note is that freshness as well as growing conditions can influence the nitrate level in these powerful foods. But the broader pattern is still the same. A diet rich in those leafy greens we discussed, as well as root vegetables, helps to support this pathway. And once we solidify the foundation of nitric oxide production, the next question becomes, how consistent is it in your bloodstream? Because nitric oxide doesn't just need to be produced, it needs to be stable to have an average action on the blood vessels. In the bloodstream, nitric oxide can become degraded more quickly in situations of oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is the process that you can liken to the browning of an apple when it's exposed to air. The same thing happens in our bodies, but we have antioxidant mechanisms built in to combat that. So when there is more oxidative stress present, Nitric oxide signaling capacity grows weaker. And this is where antioxidant status becomes relevant in nitric oxide production. Nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin E, glutathione can help to buffer oxidative stress and support the environment in which nitric oxide operates. So production and preservation go together. It's not only about how much you make or intake, it's also about how well it's maintained when it's in your bloodstream. And this brings us to another part of the nitric oxide story that a lot of people don't give consideration to yet. The nitrate pathway number 2 that we discussed earlier depends on the thriving bacteria living on the back of your tongue. And again, those bacteria are responsible for converting the nitrates into nitrites, which are then necessary for that downstream nitric oxide production. If that bacterial population is disrupted, conversion can decrease. And an important note is that modern research links changes in the oral microbiome, especially those that are involved in this nitrate to nitrite metabolism, with changes to cardiometabolic function markers, which supports the relevance of this pathway. Certain oral hygiene practices can influence this pathway greatly. For example, frequent use of antiseptic mouthwashes can decrease the populations of these important bacteria. This definitely doesn't mean that oral hygiene isn't important, but balance matters greatly. If you've focused heavily on the diet piece of the puzzle and you've checked your nitric oxide and it hasn't shifted much, the oral environment may be the missing link in your story. Another strategy involved in this same second pathway is to remember that once nitrates are swallowed, they encounter the hopefully acidic environment of the stomach. If stomach acidity is reduced, that conversion step may not occur efficiently. And this is the case in many individuals who experience chronic acid reflux or are on over-the-counter acid-reducing medications for long periods of time. Even more stress in the nervous system signaling, because it's involved in the production of stomach acid, can play a huge role here. And if you have long-standing digestive complaints, or SIBO, for instance, or even the presence of H. pylori, those can all influence this step. Another great way to think of this is that production upstream is only as good as conversion downstream. And there's one more major lever that we're going to talk about that influences nitric oxide production, and it doesn't involve food at all. Exercise stimulates nitric oxide production through mechanical and metabolic signals in the blood vessels. When you move, especially through resistance training or interval style training, blood flow increases, and that increased flow increases the pressure and this shearing stress against the blood vessel walls, which stimulates nitric oxide production. And when you look across training studies, exercise tends to increase these markers in the blood across the board. This is one reason why exercise reliably supports your heart health and cardiovascular health. It's not just about the burning of the calories or the building of the muscle. It's about this signaling efficiency, and nitric oxide is one of the chemicals involved. There's even a specific short exercise routine that is used to stimulate nitric oxide production quickly. This short sequence is sometimes referred to as a nitric oxide dump routine, and it's designed to create brief bursts of muscle contraction and increased blood flow. The structure is simple, and you can look up other videos on the many different ways you can approach this. But the structure involves a series of body weight movements performed close together in short intervals, typically with minimal rest in between. And a great part about this dump routine is that it doesn't require any equipment and it can be done in just a few minutes. And like any other exercise approach, consistency matters more than perfection or any other approach. The repeated signaling is what strengthens this pathway over time. So let's look at how all of these pieces now come together in some real-world context. Imagine someone who may be focused on one of these levers alone, maybe just the dietary component, for instance, without looking at the breathing patterns, the oral microbiome, the stomach acidity piece, or the exercise components. They might be eating all the nitrate-rich foods in the world, but still not converting efficiently because there is something missing further down in the chain of events. And as with many root cause approaches, when you address multiple angles simultaneously, the overall pattern shifts more predictably. It's often not about chasing the single tactic or the quick fix, but recognizing how many functions in our body, including nitric oxide production, involve the intricate balance between multiple systems at the same time. And once you start to see that pattern in other areas of life too, the question may shift from how do I boost or increase this to what's coordinating these inputs and outputs underneath. Nitric oxide sits at a very important functional intersection, and that's what makes this approach so useful. It connects airflow, vascular signaling, digestive power, microbial balance, and of course, exercise and movement. And when those systems are aligned, production tends to follow. When one of the links weakens, output shifts. And that's maybe a part that many miss, is that nitric oxide at its core is useful because it reflects regulation. If this connects to what you're experiencing and you're looking to understand what is regulating these systems underneath, I'd love to know that in the comments below. And so the conversation moves from shifting a single number, such as nitric oxide, into the systems that govern its production and its circulation and its adaptability. And now that you understand how nitric oxide is produced and the system's levers that influence it, the next question becomes what other pieces or systems influence it in the first place? And one of the largest upstream influences is insulin resistance. It directly affects how blood vessels respond, how adaptable they are, and thus how nitric oxide signaling works. If you want to go deeper into that layer, check out this next video here on insulin resistance and fatigue. It connects the metabolic side of what's happening in this conversation to what's happening at the vascular and the cellular levels. I'm Dr. Kenny, Root Cause Health Detective. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.